It is so nice out. I'm just in a
It's just been a great week.
great
Has been.
place.
There we go. Live video. I'm going to pop up my Facebook just in case somebody chimes in with a question, but I have my sound turned off on there.
I am going to make you the host, Betsy.
Okay, because then I can let people in the waiting room like Michael McGraw. He's one of our other board members.
Excellent.
Kelly is someone I have known for well more than 10 years, considering my younger child is 25 years, and she's one of the midwives that I have known since then. And she's been a big supporter of the 802.
You admitted
Yeah, so you're welcome
Kelly.
to examine.
2 months ago, Cal gave an investor insider knowledge about your company.
I didn't know that. And if you had known, I suppose I would have tried to fire him.
Michael, your sound is live, just so you know. There we go. Now he's muted. Seems like a conversation we didn't need to be part of. Well, I'll keep admitting people as they come in, and I'll keep an eye on the comment section over here. But you guys are the stars of the show, given today's topic. Julie, do you want me to just start with a little introduction?
Yeah,
Okay. So welcome to the 802. This is our 4th monthly town hall. And the idea behind this is that people can come in through Zoom and actually be part of the conversation. They can watch later on the Facebook Live. But we're trying to bring topics to Kansans that are important to Kansans. And so we're going to be doing a wide range of things through the year. And if you have an idea for something you would love to see a speaker talk about, feel free, put it in the comments and we'll find somebody. Some things that we have coming up have more to do also with more teacher things, because it's a big back to school kind of topic. We've also talked about perhaps doing some gun control legislation stuff like the Be Smart program. Would love to have somebody from the Kansas Reflector come on and talk about our Kansas legislature and what we can expect this next year from them, because last year was so much fun. So all kinds of different things that are meaningful to all of us. And we're nonpartisan. We have nothing to do with any political party. We don't specifically support any particular candidate. We might say this person is favored by, like, they're a gun sense candidate. You know, they believe in common sense gun laws. We might say these candidates are favored by Moms for Liberty, and perhaps they wouldn't be who you would vote for, but we're not saying who you should vote for. Anyway, so that's not our deal. What our deal is that we're a nonprofit organization that began as a Facebook group called Vote No Northeast Kansas. And it was really all about last August's vote about the constitutional amendment that we said, no, that's not for us. We Kansans, we are the free state, and we believe in our personal liberties, and we believe in bodily autonomy, and don't tread on me, and all that lovely stuff. So that's how this group began. But then after we won, and that's where our name came from, that vote was on August 2nd, as in 802. See what we did there? So that's where our name came from, but we had so much momentum still going, and we said, we can't just let this shrivel up and die. We got to do something with this. And because Julie's a big old educator, and because I'm really big on healthcare access, we know those would be part of our big planks, but we wanted to make this an educational experience for people. And if we ever get our website done, that's another story. There's a curriculum coming about healthcare access that I'm about 3/4 done with now. And you'll just have ways to reach out and learn more about our community of the 802 United. We like to, as many group meetings do, start off with our mission statement to keep our focus to what we're here about. So here goes. The 802 United values the people and opportunities available in Kansas. We strive to make our state a welcoming environment for all humans, utilizing principles that put community and purposeful kindness ahead of ideological extremism. And I'm going to stop there.
well, I would like to introduce to us Brian Skinner, who is a 2023 Kansas Teacher of the Year. He teaches at Newton High School as a special ed teacher. And I'm going to verify that he's a pretty good guy too. So Brian, why don't you tell us a little bit about what made you decide to go into teaching, and then share with us how long you've taught and where all you've taught?
Perfect. Yeah. So thank you for having me here. I always enjoy any platform where I'm able to promote the good work that public educators are doing, because I think it's so important for the future of our kids and the next generations that are coming up. So as Julie had mentioned, so I am a special education teacher at Newton High School. I'm the department chair and I'm going into my 11th year there. I'm also actively involved with Newton's Project Search program as the case manager, which is a program that is designed pretty exclusively for vocational skills for those that have finished their academic programming, but are then that 18 to 21-year-old range within special ed. And I would say I went into teaching for many of the same reasons that other educators do. I come from a family of educators, but that's not enough. It also comes down to the aspect that I enjoy being able to help others see their best potential. Towards the end of my talk that I'm going to give, I'm going to talk about my philosophy of education. And one of the key components for that is being able to help those that would struggle to be able to find the same level of success if someone else wasn't there assisting them. And I think that's really the crux of public education. And that's a lot of what drove me into this profession. So.
Okay, well, I think you're right that a lot of teachers come from education families, and that's quite a tradition to be carrying on. So thank you for that, Brian, and thanks your family for that. You have a little bit of a slideshow presentation for us. So we will let you take that over, and then we'll have some questions for you.
Perfect. Yep, I'll share. I just got about 15 or so minutes to just kind of talk about what this year has really been for me. So let me get that pulled up. Right. So I believe that you're able to see my screen. Is that correct?
Correct.
So excellent. For me, one of the big focuses that I have to hit on as I look at this year has been joy in the classroom. And that's something that I've tried to keep at the highlight of everything that I've done. And with that in vain, so this is kind of the main headshot that I would have that I would show people, but I was told by many people recently that, especially when I'm talking about joy, I need to have a headshot that actually reflects this better. So I'm going to say that my real headshot is this one here, which I think articulates me in the classroom and articulates the importance of educators need to make sure that they are enjoying what they're doing. They need to have fun, and they need to be their authentic selves. This is me at a pep assembly from just about a year ago. And it's not a Newton High School pep assembly if I'm not just going all out being competitive in some way. And the students know that, they respect that. And I think it just improves the overall culture of the building, and in turn improves the learning. So as I want to just outline a little bit of the process as how I got to where I am as Kansas Teacher of the Year. It started a long time ago with nominations. Each district is able to nominate one elementary representative and one secondary representative. So there are 286 districts in the state of Kansas. From there, you have to fill out some forms just addressing your philosophy of education, talking about your vision for public education, and I'm having some letters of recommendation. And they name then some semifinalists and finalists in March. And then they have another step where they really work and spend some time in your classroom. They spend some time videoing you and doing some interviews just to kind of get a better caption of how could you represent the profession. And then in September is when I was named Kansas Teacher of the Year, which means, because we are almost September, I will be naming then the 2024 Kansas Teacher of the Year in just about a month. And although I'll be sad to see my official term end, I'm very excited for this next group of 8 that's coming up. So, and with that, throughout this time so far, I've had just over that triple digit number of times that I've been able to present. Got almost a dozen left, and I've been able to travel to a number of different states. And I see that as significant because it's been an opportunity for me to be able to share some of the great things that I've seen in Kansas outside of Kansas, which has been really cool. And so as I look then at the year in review, the 2 things that come to mind most, One, public schools are doing great things across the entire state. I have been to dozens of districts, so I feel very qualified in being able to say that there are amazing things happening. And with that, I've also had the privilege of being able to speak to aspiring educators through a lot of college educator prep programs. And the level of care that the next generation of educators is bringing is really high quality. They get how to help every student. They get the importance of it really being every student that matters, and working from there. And I think that's really important for our profession going forward. And then I have to acknowledge the 7 others that I work with. So the picture here is the team of the 8 of us. And it wouldn't have been able to be the same advocacy here if I wouldn't have had these 7 other amazing individuals that have really helped me. And we've articulated leadership, teamwork, and joy as being some real key components of what this process has been. So if I start looking at leadership, I think it's important when I think about the sphere of public education to think about what a leader is in the classroom and the leaders that I've seen in the classroom. Sometimes there's this misconception that a teacher needs to be this authority figure in the classroom. But I would push back on that based off of my experience and what I've seen. And the best leaders that I've seen are those that instill trust in their classroom and those that inspire others. And I see that as a difference of a welcoming environment that pushes someone forward versus an authority figure, which is more of a fear-driven mindset. And when I look at those two differences, the leadership is what I've seen across the board. And I've seen it clear that the students have responded and loved those kinds of experiences much better. And with that, I need to bring some special education focus, because special education is obviously a huge part of what I do, being a special education teacher. So with this, I am fortunate enough to be able to have another one of my team members, Miss Jamie Swindler, who is over there, second from the left, who is also a special education teacher. And she had the privilege of being part of an organization called Just Like You Films, and more specifically with a film Just Like You Autism. And these are films that I would highly recommend to anyone to go and look at to just understand the better nature within the classroom. And for Just Like You Films Autism, it is a film that she had one of her students be a part of, and she was able to give him a voice. And that's one of the things that she's most proud of. And it's one of the things that all teachers, particularly myself and Miss Jamie as special ed teachers, really value about our profession is we're able to give voice to those that maybe would struggle to find theirs. And this is a film that I think is so important in representing all of the different ways that individuals learn and things that society just needs to be cognizant of in really helping to push success. It's one that I would encourage anyone to watch. It's 20 minutes. You can find it on YouTube, and it actually won an Emmy a couple years ago. So extremely educational piece. And with that comes the notion of autism and the prevalence that it has within our country. And this comes from the Center for Disease Control. And you can see how these statistics have been changing pretty dramatically. And so one of the things that has been a focus is on testing within the state of Kansas. And not to knock any kinds of tests that are out there, but I think rather to highlight the significance of having multiple measures of testing and testing or assessing rather in a way that is diverse. I think this data really represents the importance of that. Individuals who have autism, there's no one strategy that works. It's all about differentiation. And when we bring differentiation in and we work as a team to collectively address a neurodiverse society, through our teaching and our classroom and our learning, if we don't have our assessments and our tests that can be just as diverse, then we're immediately putting up some unintended barriers that can impact the results of that and skew. So I think this data really shows the need for our assessing to be as diverse as our learning and our teaching is. And so as I look at some of the highlights that I've seen across the state, I've seen some cross-curricular work. So here in Newton, we've got our Intro to Industrial Tech class, manufacturing. What you can see is the plant stand that their engineering class had designed from scratch just earlier. So you've got from the manufacturing level all the way to from the design level to be able to produce a product that's happening in our public schools. You've got Railer Connections that's happening at Newton, where you've got a lot of cross groups that work together to help support each other and have different activities. And you can see the joy on people's face as they learn how to balance social skills. You have the idea of being able to just be willing to be ridiculous. And if that's what it takes to change up what you do, to eliminate the stigmas, to connect with even more individuals, that's what the students need sometimes. And it's what allows them to feel like they can be most successful. Or here, as I look at some of the other districts that I've been to, with Emporia, where you've got their high school educator prep program, which is great to be able to highlight the profession at such a young age to where they see that as an opportunity, where you've got fifth graders in Hutch in that top middle picture, where they're able to learn car manufacturing skills already at that age to be able to pursue some trade pieces, to where you've got innovative skills of being able to work with pre-K. You've got the bottom right where educators are willing to dress up as Bob Ross or whatever other artist to help inspire others. The joy you can see in the kids. Emporia, which I hadn't realized, is one of 6 schools in the country that does glass blowing at the high school level. And I think that's phenomenal. That's at one of our Kansas public schools. And being able to have sight words, musical sight words in a way that's engaging as well. I think it's so easy to get caught up in the negativity sometimes that surrounds education. As you look at any of the political spheres or any of the things that are sometimes on social media. But I think the work that I've done and the things that I've seen highlight that there's so much to celebrate. I mean, everyone in these pictures is happy and they're excited, and that's something I've seen continuously. And I think one of the most important things in our profession is to really celebrate it first, and that's the way we uplift things going forward. So if I'm going to share a few pieces of some of the honors that I've had going through, I've been able to advocate for public education with Sharice Davis, as well as other legislators and congressmen and women in Washington, D.C. I've been able to work with Commissioner Watson and Governor Kelly. I've had a few really great and cool honors of being able to be represented at the Chiefs and the Royals game. And I note those here because I think when we can elevate teachers at a level outside of the education world, I think it does nothing but uplift our profession. So I'm honored that some major sports arenas have been able to do that and highlight the profession. Of course, then I was able to be then in DC at the White House with my mother there and representing then with the National Teacher of the Year, Rebecca Peterson from Oklahoma, as President Biden, his wife, Dr. Jill Biden, were able to recognize us in the Rose Garden. You've got Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, that was able to have a roundtable and listen to what Kansans need and give a chance to highlight the things happening in our state. And being able to then represent on a larger level. And with that comes connections that you can build across the nation. Because as focused as I am on Kansas's public education, it's also good to be able to build and take some of the great things that are happening in other states as well and be able to bring them back. And these are some that I've really connected with across my National State Teacher of the Year circuit. As we were able to celebrate then that Washington week at a gala. And of the last of those pictures, I think it's just key to put forward, again, these other 7 individuals that I've been able to work with. That quote over there on the other end of the screen, we don't always feel like we're enough, but I promise you we are. I think epitomized some of the toughness of this profession, but also some of the reward. This profession's hard, but that's because we have a human connection piece to it. That's because we see the joy that comes out of it. And anything we put our heart and soul into, we sometimes don't feel like we're enough, but we are. And the things that I've seen around really represents that. And that brings me to my philosophy of education, which I had alluded to. It's important to help students and make sure they feel supported, worthwhile, give honest affirmation, and help them believe in themselves so that they can achieve their best success. Success is different for everyone. A decade or 2 decades ago, the notion might have been more success is college. And success can be college. It's college for so many people, but it's also so many other things for so many other people. And really helping people find those successes is important. Nothing in life that is worth having comes easily. And that sometimes you have to work to get there. And it's really worth it once you do. So how can others help? Because I think that's the important part as you bring this into the conversation. I think as many people as we can get into the conversation to be a voice for the positive things happening in public schools, that's where we make the biggest gain. Only we choose our narrative, we represent our narrative, and we celebrate the things that we do well. And that instills a want for people to be part of this profession. That second bullet point, encouraging kids to have opportunities without technology, connects to a different presentation that I do. I have a lot of passion for social media and its impact on youth in the classroom. And although technology does wonderful things, it has allowed this to be able to happen right here today. It's also really important that we don't get so caught up in technology that we lose the human connection piece, because that connection piece is where the biggest growth happens, and it's so important. As well as then that third bullet point, identifying strengths of teachers and students. If I were to ask you to think about the strength of a loved one, you probably could quickly. And then if I were to ask you to think of a strength of your own, it might take a second more. We oftentimes get caught up in recognizing others' strengths and struggling to find our own. And if we struggle to find our own sometimes, then our kids probably do too. And so it's important to not only recognize those, but share with them what we see in them so we can help them identify what their path is and build connections as we do it. The 2023 Kansas Teacher of the Year vision is education is what we make it. The notion that everybody does wonderful things individually. Everybody will have successes independently and on their own, but it's collectively what we do as a society, as a community of educators, as a community supporting public educators that makes the biggest difference and allows our society to grow in the way we all want to see it best. So with that, that kind of wraps up a lot of the pieces that I wanted to just address from the jump to get the conversation going. And I'd be happy to engage in conversation from here.
Brian, that was awesome. I mean, I cannot imagine how exhausted you are after an entire year of traveling all over Kansas and all over the United States, sharing your knowledge and learning from the others. One of the things that you said that interested me was that you saw great things going on in our schools, but then when we go and we look at social media or we listen to the politicians, it is, we're failing, we're failing, we're failing. How can we, as educators and as concerned citizens, how can we change that narrative, in your opinion?
Right. I think we have to focus back on why we came into this profession. And I know that can seem cliched almost at times of think about your why. It's one of those things that's talked about often. But one of the things that I do is I just revert back at different points in the year. I put it on my calendar as a notification of what makes me smile. What is something that makes me happy? Because when you smile at the profession that you, in the job that you have, the profession that you have, or the day that you're being given, you're more likely to leave satisfied. The National Teacher of the Year, Rebecca Peterson from Oklahoma, says, not every day is a good day, but every day has something that is good in it. And highlights the importance of finding just one good thing in every day. And the message she represents is such one of hope and upliftingness. And when we forget to do that, we get caught up in some of the pieces of the profession that are really hard. We get caught up in some of the negative attacks that give us reason to just kind of spin in this cycle of negativity, and it hurts us. So really, I think that first step is celebrating what we do and remembering why we're doing it. And I think the more that we can do that, the easier it is for the stresses to fall into the background. You had mentioned it'd be exhausting traveling around the country and the state presenting. while also still doing all of these teaching. I was on leave from my classroom, and I'm happy with that. And yeah, it was, but I saw differences in next generations that I would be able to impact moving up. I learned amazing things from the other 7 on the Kansas team and from others on the national team. And it made it seem like it was less work as a result. It made it seem less weighing down, less stressful, because when we love what we do, it's easier to be excited about it. So
I do think sometimes as educators, we forget what our why is. And when we forget what our why is, all the outside noise really brings you down. And I'm just going to use the Idaho Teacher of the Year as an example. She left, I just heard this today, she left the profession and left Idaho because there was a group of people who looked at her Facebook page and boy, she's teaching all these LGBTQ plus things in her 4th grade class. And she's teaching about gender identity in a 4th grade class. And she said, I support those things, but I don't teach those things in my class. And the people that were attacking her it was pretty brutal. So educators out there, if you can remind yourself of the why, that would hopefully help you keep moving forward, because we need all of the educators that we have in Kansas. You also mentioned, Brian, that you saw some really great things going on in our schools. Can you share some more about those?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And before I do that, though, I just want to take a note, just because I feel like I'm good friends with Karen Lordson, the Idaho State Teacher of the Year. So I've had a lot of communication with her as she's been through these decisions and this journey, and it's just been really unfortunate to see some of the attacks that she's had to face. And I know that it was really difficult for her to step away from the classroom that she loved. But she felt like ultimately that's what she needed to be able to do. But I am pleased to say that she has not left the profession entirely. She is teaching. She's a professor of education in Illinois now. So she has moved states, but she's still working hard to promote the public education profession, because that's where her heart lands. So, and you had then asked, sorry, I've talked about that. You had asked about some of the great things within our schools. I think some of the great things that I've seen most are just authentic human beings. And I realize that that's not a clear and specific answer, but authenticity, I think, is really important. Because students are really smart. They can see when we aren't being authentic, when we aren't being ourselves. And doing that through the ways that we instruct, I think, is really clear. I saw that in a lot of elementary level science classes, to where you can see just this clear passion of how a teacher is bringing innovation with how maybe aviation, they're building paper airplanes, they're putting different weights on it, and they're studying the way that the airplane would fly. And they're doing that because they love to have fun with shooting airplanes across the room, and they're fine being ridiculous doing that, but they're able to incorporate all of these physics lessons in with it at a very young age. Or any of the schools that I've been to where they've had a jewelry making class or engineering classes, to where they've been able to manufacture different awards or cups, or solve different problems with programs like Avid, or where you're able to have your welding manufacturing programs or CNC machining. Like, for every industry, there are programs designated to that within public education. Sometimes an uninformed narrative is, we just teach them to read a book and to do math problems and what history was and going through science and physics. We don't teach them about real world things, but that's uninformed, because that's not it. We teach of the core standards, but we teach them in really relatable, applicable ways. We have personal finance classes across the state of Kansas. We have your career courses across the state of Kansas. And we have at every step individuals that are able to leave the school system with a diploma and with the skills to be able to be successful. So that's what I've seen.
What I love about what you're describing goes back to your philosophy early on, where you talked about individualization and inclusion, and finding the way that person can express their joy, the way that person learns best. Are they kinetic? Are they visual? Are they auditory? What gets the information into their head in a way that makes sense to them? And I feel as though that's one of the really critical points about public education, because you guys educate all y'all. You don't cherry pick. I'm going to take this patient, this patient, this patient, especially as a sped teacher. You're like, bring it. This is my thing. This is my wheelhouse. I'm going to do this. And that's not something that a smaller private school can do. And so I love that about what you're describing. Not everybody is on the cookie cutter path straight to college. Let's address what is successful for this human as they come through our educational system. Love this. It's just
And that's so true. So that one of the things that I should have mentioned that it goes right along with that is I talked about Project Search a little bit in my introduction, and Project Search may be a program that a lot don't know about. It's not in every community, but it is in a number of communities, and it's a national wide program. And I'd mentioned it's 18 to 21-year-olds, special education identified, that have finished their academic programming, and its purpose is vocational skills, meaning these students are spending the entire year with a partnership somewhere. In Newton specifically, our partnership is with our NMC Health, our local hospital, and they work and do rotations in that hospital with the exclusive goal of securing a full-time job with benefits so that they can be successful on their own. And it's for students that sometimes would have struggled to have been able to have that independent success on their own. And what I love most, though, about Project Search, you've got those great pieces of helping the students be successful, but those are the students more so than any that are going to stay in the community that you're a part of. They're the ones that are going to build up the community. And so many of these programs, when you break from that cookie cutter mold, are programs and styles of teaching that not only helps every kid, but it's what builds and keeps your community strongest.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge reason that gets overlooked sometimes.
So I'm sorry, you're saying Project Search? Is that what
Yes.
it's called?
Project
Okay.
Search.
I'm putting that in the chat, just so I remember it.
I've not heard of that either, so I'm glad that you shared that with us, Brian. I know in my employment, I traveled across the state, much like Brian did, and was in and out of school buildings constantly. When you walk into a building, can you get a feel for that building and whether or not it is a joyous building in Kansas? Do you notice that?
Oftentimes you can, both on your college campuses that you go to as you're entering an educator program. It's usually pretty easy to see the strength of the program because you can see and hear the conversations and kind of the joy of the individuals that are working there. But the same thing within some of the public schools that we were in. Part of it depends on the day. Are we getting there in the morning before kids have woken up? Are we getting there in the afternoon during passing period or around lunch? Some of those pieces, but usually you can see from the students and how they interact with each other, but you can see just as clearly from the faculty and the staff of whether or not they're enjoying what they're doing. Because hiding a culture that is stressful is not easy to do.
What you're saying just makes me think of Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers says, when there's some kind of crisis going on, look for the helpers. What you're describing is when you walk into a school, look for the joy.
Yeah. And that's advice that I give often. One of the questions that I get frequently is, what advice would you give to someone entering this profession? And so that is along that same advice that I would often give to those entering the profession is not only look for the joy, but look for those that you aspire to be like. Look for those that are role models to you and cling to them, because you're going to spend more time around those that you look up to. And just by sheer proximity, you're going to be mimicking those patterns of positivity, and that strengthens your culture. The culture can be hurt by an administrator, or it can be helped by an administrator, but culture lives and is really built through all of the staff, all of those that are there day in and day out. It can't be reliant on just one person or one few people. You've got to attach yourself to as many as you can that you aspire to be like, and just let that contagious joy take over.
That is very insightful, Brian. And I think it also rings very true from my experiences. So thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
You also mentioned in your presentation about testing and how it needs to be more than just a moment in time.
Mhm.
And as we know, our assessment tests that some of our political leaders like to use to point that we're failing as our public education is failing in Kansas, that is the one shot in time.
Mhm.
Can you kind of talk about the sequences that your district goes through for testing and how much testing they do and how the teachers use that data then to go back and work with the kids?
Mhm. Right. So as we're looking at any legislators that might be using a testing data point to be able to make whatever statement about how public schools are doing, the first thing that I would say to that is a data point is a data point. And without the greater context, it can be whatever you want it to be. It can create whatever narrative fits the narrative that you want it to be. And I think that's the first thing to be able to, that you need to think about when looking at some of those statewide tests, district-wide tests that don't represent the bigger picture. Because it's really important that you have not only the test, but the intermittent assessments across the way, that you have the skill-based content instruction that builds confidence. If we are going to have just these single data points that are there, then districts need to represent the skills and the contents through what they're doing to build up to that, to where even a student on their poorest day is able to feel the confidence in being able to do that one shot that could reflect poorly on them, however unfairly that may be. A lot of districts are working through KISA processes, which is an accreditation process within Kansas. And part of that is analyzing the data. And I know Newton is working through analyzing the data right now as we're working through that process. So we are doing a lot of deep dives into what does this data represent? What doesn't this data represent? And how can we make sure that the practices that we are implementing within our classrooms that are best for kids, that address the standards, that address the skills, while also hitting on the content, can then be reflected in some of these data points? Or how can we have other data points that can represent the growth and the skills within our classes just the same way? Even if it is 1 point, it still gives a glimpse into a school. So I don't want to ever discount any of the data that is there. And it's important for districts to kind of look through the patterns, disaggregate, and constantly be reflecting and adapting what they do. My Bethel College education program that I went through was considered to be the reflective teacher. That's what its title was. Because as educators, when you're looking at data, when you're working with kids, when you're designing and building instruction, you always have to be reflective. And that's the crux of it.
So you talked about your district is working on looking at the data and pulling out what it means and what it doesn't mean. Is there any plan, after you all have become very proficient in that, is there any plan to share that with your wider community so that parents, legislators, school board members can understand that?
Mm-hmm. I don't want to speak for my administration as to what their plans are, how they're showing, but I know that our district is really focused on transparency. It's been something that we've emphasized at board meetings and at a number of steps as we've made changes throughout our curriculum, throughout our policies, any of those pieces within our district the last few years. Transparency has been a key component. We are wanting to make sure, as it has been, that parents are always aware of what's happening in the classroom and the benefits that those experiences are having in the classroom. So I would be stunned if those pieces weren't shared with the community. because within Newton, as is the case of so many districts, the more that we can have parent involvement in what we do, the more that they can know what it is we're doing, the better we can work with our kids. And the reality is, we are already doing that. We are already doing a lot of transparent things. It's already clear through how we post our syllabi, through how we communicate with parents. They're engaged with their kids' lives. They know what's happening in our classrooms. And so it'll just be a natural part of just continuing the communication.
That is just absolutely so encouraging. I hope that other districts take a look at what you guys are doing and kind of latch onto that, because I think that is one area in which we could take control as educators of the narrative that we're failing because we're not. Sometimes I am amazed after I've seen a kid come through the school system, what he or she goes out and does in their real life. I mean, it has made an impact, and it's fun. It's fun to watch. Another thing that we hear a lot of is that we are indoctrinating our students. You've been all over the state. How much indoctrination have you seen, Brian?
I've seen absolutely zero. To say that I've seen any would be the same kind of attacks as you had mentioned earlier with the Idaho State Teacher of the Year. It's just not something that is present in our classrooms. We care about kids. We want to make sure that they feel safe, feel seen, feel heard, because that's what the data shows will help them be successful. But that's not indoctrination. We don't indoctrinate kids. I think it's so important for kids to leave my classroom knowing what they believe, why they believe it, and why others can have perspectives that are different from their own. But the key part is perspectives different from their own, what they believe, not what I believe. At any point for me to put my views on into another child's mindset would be inappropriate, and that's not what educators do. I'm not unique in believing that. I have not seen indoctrination, and I would say that's a false narrative.
I would say it's very false. I know when I was teaching middle school and we would have our general elections in the United States, and I'd go to school the next day, or I'd wear my I voted that day. They're like, who'd you vote for, Mrs. Wilson? And I always would say, we have secret ballots in America for a reason.
Right.
And I prefer to keep that secret. And I think most teachers do that. 98%, 99% of teachers.
Right.
I mean, we're always going to find one possibly that
Absolutely.
doesn't follow that kind of a
Maybe
philosophy.
they have a
But
family member that's a candidate. They're like, I voted for my cousin. I'm like, yeah, you did.
there you go.
I want to just jump in with a story that tells it that this whole issue is not brand new. Back when my kids were in grade school, and my kids are 30 and 25, so it's been a hot minute. And there was a sort of a cultural movement of people, doesn't matter who they were, what profession they were, wearing a safety pin. And that little safety pin meant, I am a safe place. You are safe with me. And it didn't necessarily mean if you want to come out of the closet, it didn't mean any specific thing. But the Shawnee Mission School District teachers were instructed that they could not wear the safety pin because somehow that was like a don't say gay thing, that they had to take their safety pin off. And I remember my kid's favorite first grade teacher was crushed that she had to take off her safety pin because she really meant it. She loved those kids with all her heart, and she wanted them to know they could come to her with anything and they would be safe with her. But it was politicized way back then.
Yes, that is very true. And kids need to know there's someone safe for them to go to, not just because maybe they want to come out or they don't want to come out. There are other reasons why kids need to feel safe. Our society is very different than it was even 20 years ago. And that's almost like a safety net for some of our kids that we need to have in place. So really, it's a shame when a district says, no, you can't tell the kids you're a safe person to talk to. Do you have any thoughts on that, Brian?
It comes down to an idea that we've talked about sometimes on our Kansas Teacher of the Year team of the invisible backpack, which is the idea that every individual has things in this invisible backpack that they carry with them that weigh them down sometimes, that keep them from maybe being able to give their best on any particular task or at any particular day. Sometimes they're smaller things that are temporary. Sometimes they're really heavy things that weigh on them. And as educators, it's not our job to know what is in that invisible backpack, but it is our job to know that there's almost certainly something in that invisible backpack. And when we give individuals in society grace, when we give our kids grace of, there may be a reason, and it's not personal, as to why you didn't bring a pencil or why your head is on your desk or why you came in late, any of those pieces, we open up those connections. And that's the idea of safety. That's the idea of them feeling comfortable in an environment, realizing that an individual cares about them. And if they feel like an individual cares about them, they're more capable in being able to learn whatever academic pieces there are. We can't succeed academically if our basic needs aren't being met. And that's not indoctrination. That's caring about an individual. That's being a good human. At the end of every day, 100% of teachers and parents and students are humans. And sometimes there's the fear that if we care about a child a lot and we are a safe person for them, that's in some way discounting the parent or guardian, but it's not. Individuals are allowed to have more than one person that cares about them. And the more people you have that care about you, and the more people you know that care about you, the more you're able to feel like you can do something good. And I think that narrative would discount how much educators work with parents, and how much it's a team of working to make sure that child gets what they need.
I've always said that school really is about building relationships. And that's what I hear you saying, Brian. You're
Yes.
building relationships with your students, you're building relationships with your colleagues, you're building relationships with your students' parents. That's a very critical part of a successful educator in my mind. And sometimes I think that we get so bogged down in all the, oh my gosh, we got to get this done, we got to get this done. We don't build time in the day to do that. And if I were going to encourage a teacher to do something, that would be what I would encourage them to do, is take some time to build those relationships, whether that means you go sit down with them at lunch, or if you're on recess, you walk with them. That's how it works. So I am so glad to hear you say those things, Brian.
Yeah.
One of the other things that we've touched on is that we have members of the legislature, we have members of the State Board of Education who continually tell Kansans that our schools are failing, and they're not failing. You're a perfect example of that. But I do believe it's time that we acknowledge that there are some things in our education system that we need to improve upon. From your travels, could you share some things that you would do? I always play this game. If Julie was in charge of the world, if Brian was in charge of the educational world in Kansas, what changes would he recommend we make?
Right. Before I mention the changes, I would just echo a quick note, because the Kansas vision is, the Kansas motto is Kansans lead the world in the success, Kansas lead in the success of the world. And with that, there are a lot, when I go into my State Teacher of the Year pieces, a lot of other states are really envious of some of the things that they hear about with Kansas. So I want to just note, it's not just Kansans saying, yeah, we're great in Kansas. When I go and I meet with my other State Teachers of the Year, they say, whoa, look at what Kansas is doing. So that'd be the first thing that I would point towards any that say we aren't doing great things. But to your original question, Julie, of if I could wave the wand and I could make sure that the education world changed in blank way. The first place that I would look at would be special education and special education funding and resources. And that goes hand in hand with promoting the profession. I do believe that promoting joy and celebrating the profession is the way to really uplift things. but it's impossible to look just at that because there are some things that are other deterrents from individuals coming to the profession. And some of them are some resources that may not always be there. Special education has never been funded at the level that IDA requires that it is. And as a result, the districts pick up those dimes and the districts have to cover that. If special education were able to be funded the way that it's constitutionally supposed to be, then those resources are able to then go back into the district's general funds in being able to ensure that maybe our para supports or our custodians are able to have higher wages, or our teachers are able to have higher wages, or we're able to hire another teacher so our class sizes can be smaller. Because when we have a smaller group that we're able to work with or more supports in our school system, we're better able to build that individualized piece. So the first place I would look at would be that special education IDA funding. And then after that would just be able to, if I could change a mindset, which this is a very intangible piece, but if I could change a mindset of others of just remembering that it's when a student's having a bad day, 98% of the time is not personal, and just find some way to be able to keep that regulation piece there of, all right, I'm here and this is why I'm here and this is what this child needs. And it's okay that I don't know everything, because that's where you build upon that individualization. That's where you ensure everyone feels safe.
Okay. Michael, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask? I think that means no. Betsy, do you have
Sorry,
any
it took
more
me a
questions?
moment to get to the, it's been a fantastic presentation, so thank you so much.
I've been asking my questions as we went along. You know me, I'm not shy.
Well, Brian, I just want to thank you so much for sharing your time with us tonight and for being the educator that your students need and representing the Kansas educators for the past year. I think you've been a fabulous champion for education. And I know at least one other person on that Kansas Teacher of the Year team. You were up against very stiff competition. So very hearty congratulations to you. I hope you have a super school year and you get to spend time with your students instead of with your car and the highway. So
Great.
Do you have any last words?
Just that, yes, I am the Kansas Teacher of the Year, but there are so many others that are just as deserving. I know you had mentioned the several on the team. So I said at the night that I wanted the banquet, and I intend to say it when I have the opportunity to speak at the 2024 naming of the Kansas Teacher of the Year. Any one of them could have been named Kansas Teacher of the Year and done a fabulous job. I truly believe there's not one best educator in Kansas or one best representative of public education. There are so many, and so many of them could have been deserving of this honor. And I'm just honored and privileged that I was the one that was named to be able to do that. And I hope the more voices that I can bring in, the better. That's what I would like this legacy to be.
Well, thank you very much for your hard work. We invite all of you to tune in September for our town hall meeting. And we will post very shortly what the topic is and how to log on if you'd like to log on and watch. So thank you, Michael. Thank you, Betsy. And thank you, Brian. You guys have a good evening and we will see you all later. Bye.
Bye.